Welcome to Unveiled Mysteries, where today we uncover the chilling story of the world's most feared drug lord, Pablo Escobar. His empire ruled not just Colombia, but the world of cocaine. Pablo's journey from a poor boy in Colombia to the world's most dangerous man is a tale of ambition, power, and relentless violence. He wasn't born a king, but he died one. Born on December 1st, 1949, Pablo Emilio Escobar grew up in Rionegro, Colombia. His parents struggled to make ends meet, with his father a farmer and his mother a schoolteacher. Even as a child, Pablo dreamed big. He was never content with a simple life, and by the time he was a teenager, he knew he would do whatever it took to become rich. In 1966, at just 17 years old, Pablo dropped out of school, determined to leave his mark on the world. His first steps were not those of a legitimate businessman. In the streets of Medellin, Pablo and his cousin Gustavo Gaviria began their climb to power by engaging in petty thefts, forging documents, and stealing car parts. Gustavo Gaviria, Pablo's cousin and loyal partner, was always by his side, supporting his plans and sharing his dangerous ambitions. Their small-time crimes soon grew into something bigger. Pablo's ambition knew no bounds, and he realized the streets of Medellin had more to offer than petty thefts. By the 1970s, Pablo's criminal empire expanded. He moved into smuggling cigarettes, working his way into every illegal market he could find. Smuggling wasn't enough for Pablo. He wanted more. Soon, he began to venture into the most dangerous and lucrative trade in the world: cocaine. This was the beginning of the Medellin Cartel. Pablo's rise to the top of the drug world would make him the most feared man on the planet. But the road to power wasn't easy. Pablo had to eliminate anyone who stood in his way, and the streets of Colombia soon ran red with blood. By the early 80s, Pablo Escobar's Medellin Cartel controlled 80% of the world's cocaine trade, and his wealth became unimaginable. Pablo's net worth soared to over $30 billion. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a king, ruling his empire with an iron fist. But Pablo's empire wasn't built on money alone. It was built on fear. His enemies vanished without a trace, and even the government trembled at his name. With Gustavo by his side, Pablo's cartel operated like a well-oiled machine, smuggling tons of cocaine into the US every week, making millions in profit. But no empire lasts forever. The more power Pablo gained, the more enemies he made, and soon the tide would turn against him. Despite his enormous wealth, Pablo's obsession with control made him more ruthless. He believed anyone could be bought or killed if they defied him. Gustavo, always the strategist, helped Pablo expand his empire beyond Colombia. Together, they created a network that spanned continents. The Ochoa brothers joined Pablo in the Medellin Cartel. Jorge Ochoa, the eldest, brought discipline and logistics, helping the cartel run smoothly. Pablo's enemies, however, were not just the police or government. Rival cartels like the Cali Cartel wanted to control the cocaine trade. Carlos Lehder, an eccentric and ruthless partner of Pablo's, was key in expanding the cartel's reach by setting up smuggling routes through the Bahamas. Carlos was a wild card. His flashy lifestyle and extreme measures often attracted unnecessary attention, but his smuggling routes were highly profitable. Together, Pablo and Carlos created one of the most efficient drug smuggling operations in the world, flooding the US with cocaine and reaping billions. But this success came at a cost. The US government began taking notice, and the DEA launched a massive operation to disrupt the Medellin Cartel's activities. The DEA ramped up efforts to take down the Medellin Cartel, focusing on infiltrating Pablo's smuggling networks and cutting off his supply routes. But Pablo wasn't easy to catch. He had built an intricate network of informants, spies, and paid-off officials who kept him one step ahead of the authorities. Pablo's hitman, John Jairo Velasquez, known as Popeye, was feared across Colombia. He was responsible for hundreds of killings ordered by Escobar. Pablo, alongside Jorge Ochoa, decided to take more aggressive action. They began eliminating rival cartels, making their dominance unquestionable. With Gustavo and the Ochoa brothers by his side, Pablo became more powerful than ever. No one dared to cross the Medellin Cartel without facing deadly consequences. But Pablo's greed had no limits. He wanted more power, more control, and he would stop at nothing to become the supreme ruler of the cocaine empire. Meanwhile, the violence in Colombia was escalating. Bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings became common as the country spiraled into chaos. Rodrigo Bonilla, the Minister of Justice, became one of Pablo's fiercest enemies, speaking out against the cartel's activities and corruption. Pablo didn't take kindly to threats. Bonilla's strong stance against him would soon turn fatal, as Pablo ordered his assassination. John Jairo Velasquez carried out the hit, killing Bonilla in broad daylight, sending a chilling message to the Colombian government. This marked the beginning of a bloody war between Pablo Escobar and the Colombian government. The more they tried to stop him, the more violent he became. Pablo knew that to maintain his empire, he needed to control not just the streets, but the entire country. And he had the power to do just that. By 1984, Pablo Escobar had become the most powerful man in Colombia, and the world watched as his reign of terror continued. With his vast wealth and influence, Pablo thought he was invincible. But his reign was built on a foundation of violence, and that would soon come crumbling down. As Pablo's empire expanded, so did his list of enemies. Rival cartels, the Colombian government, and even the US wanted him stopped. The US government, led by the DEA, began working closely with Colombia to bring down the Medellin Cartel, increasing the pressure on Pablo. But Pablo was relentless. He fought back against anyone who threatened his empire, leaving a trail of blood and destruction in his wake. Luis Carlos Galan, a prominent politician, became one of Pablo's fiercest opponents, speaking out against the violence and drug trade in Colombia. But Pablo had no tolerance for opposition. In 1989, Galan was assassinated, marking a dark moment in Colombia's history and sending shockwaves through the country. Pablo was willing to do anything to stay in power, even if it meant killing those who could have changed the future of Colombia for the better. As the violence escalated, Colombia found itself in a state of chaos, with bombings, assassinations, and fear gripping the nation. Pablo Escobar's actions turned Colombia into a war zone, but to him, this was the cost of doing business, and he wasn't willing to back down. The US increased their involvement, sending military assistance to Colombia in an effort to capture Escobar and bring him to justice. But Pablo remained elusive. His network of informants and loyal supporters made him nearly impossible to capture, frustrating the efforts of both the US and Colombian forces. Pablo's empire, however, wasn't unbreakable. As the pressure increased, cracks began to show, and his most trusted allies, like Gustavo, became targets. Desperate to save his empire, Pablo made one last-ditch effort to negotiate with the Colombian government, offering to surrender if they guaranteed his safety. The Colombian government agreed to his terms, and in 1991, Pablo surrendered under one condition: he would build his own prison, La Catedral. La Catedral was no ordinary prison. It was more of a mansion, complete with a football field, a bar, and luxury accommodations for Escobar. From within his prison, Pablo continued to run his cartel, ordering hits, managing shipments, and maintaining control over his empire without interruption. Even behind bars, Pablo's violence didn't stop. His top hitman, Popeye, continued to carry out assassinations, eliminating any threats to the cartel. But Pablo couldn't stay hidden forever. Eventually, his influence and power slipped, and the Colombian government had enough. It was time for Escobar's reign to end. In 1992, the Colombian government launched a military operation to capture Escobar. His time as the untouchable kingpin was coming to a close. In a daring escape, Pablo fled La Catedral before the military could capture him, disappearing into the jungles of Colombia with his loyal followers. The DEA and Colombian forces worked tirelessly to track Escobar down. Every call, every movement was monitored, but the kingpin was always one step ahead. Pablo spent months on the run, moving from safe house to safe house with his family, but the net was closing in fast. On December 2nd, 1993, authorities finally located Escobar's hideout. His final moments would be spent in a desperate attempt to escape. In a dramatic rooftop chase, Pablo Escobar was shot and killed by Colombian forces. His reign of terror had finally come to an end. The world watched as the most feared drug lord in history was finally brought down. Colombia could begin to rebuild, but the scars left behind would remain for generations. Pablo Escobar's story is one of power, greed, and violence. His empire was built on blood, and in the end, it was blood that brought him down. And thus ends the tale of Pablo Escobar, a man who rose from poverty to become one of the richest and most feared criminals in history, but who ultimately met a violent end. Thank you for watching this episode of Unveiled Mysteries. Stay tuned for more untold stories of the world's most infamous figures.